Good afternoon. Welcome to Monday Mug Mentions, number 4, where I discuss a few things that interest me in the tabletop industry over the course of a cup of coffee. This week, I have a few things I want to chat about. Some interesting and very difficult games, some interesting marketing and media that I'm interested in. Let's go, before we do anything, we'll get right into the type of coffee I'm drinking this week. This afternoon I'm having a nice cup of Lavazza Perfetto Espresso Roast. It's very good. It's very hot. I just made it in the AeroPress, so it's boiling hot right now. Well, let's take a sip and try it. That's very good. Oh, that's tasty, tasty coffee. I've had this one before, but every time you do a nice AeroPress cup of coffee, you can really taste what the roaster intended, and this is a really, really good cup of coffee. Yeah, Lavazza's. This is an Italian company per se, but they have an office or offices in New York City, and I actually saw their offices on my way back from Toy Fair this year. So they're off the highway. I got to see where they are, but this is really, really strong, bold. It's an espresso roast, so it's going to be, no matter what, it's always going to be a little bit bolder. Good afternoon, Garrett. Thank you for joining. Garrett said, I thought MMM stood for Marshall's Monday Minute. No, Monday Mug Mentions. We just have a quick cup of coffee and chat about a few things here. Good afternoon, Josh, JT, Martin. Thanks for joining. Michael Wright, good to see you. So, that is the coffee we're drinking. That's this week. Martin, I like Mondays. They're fine. I don't know if I love Mondays, and I love you too, sir. It's so good to see you. Congratulations on the fantastic campaign you ran for your new game, Robin Hood and His Merry Men. I look forward to that coming out. We'll go over a quick bit of mail that came in this week. We got some new hats. You'll notice these are blank. They are the same hat I'm wearing right now. We're just going to fix one of the issues I have with our current hats. So I'm getting these embroidered by a local person here in Providence, as a matter of fact, this week. I also, in the mail, got new business cards. So I have been out of business cards for about a month, and I needed to get some made. I'd been planning on redoing them. So you'll see I've got a little bit different text there on the business card. It's got my name with the newer font. And then on the back, we've got a beautiful picture of Stir Fry 18 and Record and the San Antonio skyline from a very, very cool shot. So we've got new business cards already for Unpub. Good morning. Good morning, Daniel Zayas. Good to see you. And Daniel's got a bunch of projects that he's working with and working on right now. They're live on Kickstarter. If I tried to mention them all, it might take the whole 25 minutes. So be sure to check it. Just look at what he's backing and following, and that's usually a good indication of what's coming. So, all right. So let's get into the mechanism that I'm interested in this week. And I'd like to talk about something that's kind of an interesting and very difficult, I guess you'd say, mechanism in games, or difficulty settings in games where you've got some games that are really, really difficult. So the first game I want to talk about is a video game called Space Food Truck. Space Food Truck is a deck building game at heart. You're really playing a solo space food truck that you're attempting to cook the best little or specific meals. Sorry, not the best. You're trying to cook specific meals in Space Food Truck and take them to these different planets. And as you're doing this, you've got 4 different characters you control. It's also a neat co-op because you can actually say to 3 of your friends, hey, each of you control one of these characters. There's the engineer, the captain, the chef, and the scientist. And you can each control one and play it as a co-op, but it's generally a solo game. You would play all 4 on your own, and you know what's going into each character's deck. So all 4 characters have decks. You're managing 4 separate decks as you play. Now, when you go from planet to planet, terrible things or good things can happen. It's sort of a random number-generated system where you've got a procedural map that is different each time you play. So when you start to play, you will find ingredients that you need. There will be ingredients you don't need, but you build your deck like a normal deck builder. There's a power, and then there's a cost, and you have both of those values on each card. It's fairly simple in the way you play, but the game is brutally difficult. It's so difficult that after 2 years, or about a year and a half, last night or 2 nights ago, for the first time ever, on the easiest difficulty, I finally beat the game. It took about 2.5 hours total play time, and it's very satisfying, but it's also, I mean, I don't know that I would ever go back and play on the harder difficulties. Andrew and I played this game together. My development partner and I will take each one half of the ship and go play together, and we find it very fun, but we also get to learn about, making things difficult for the sake of being difficult versus maybe making things difficult in a fun way. And Space Food Truck is brutal. I mean, you will lose the game sometimes before you've even taken the first meal to the first planet where it needs to be delivered. You've got to deliver 3 different meals to 3 different planets. The first time I've done it in about a year and a half on the easiest setting was a couple nights ago. And it just doesn't make any sense to me that it would be that hard. So I think that essentially there's sort of a wall there that doesn't need to be as difficult as it is, but it's punishing. So the reason I usually lose is making a mistake in the deck building somewhere. And I mean, 1 to 2 mistakes and the game is sort of over. You know, if you don't build the deck just right, the game's sort of over. And that brings me to the game that I want to talk about in the tabletop industry, which is very, very similar to a certain extent. And that's Food Chain Magnate by Splotter. And I have played Food Chain Magnate probably about 9 times. I love this game. It is fantastic. It's brutal. It is very, very, very controversial for a lot of people. If you don't like Take That, or you don't like games where you can really screw your opponents over, it's not for you. Absolutely not. Food Chain Magnate, you are a food, I guess you'd just say a restaurateur. You're a guy who owns, or a person who owns a restaurant, and you can put up more restaurants through the course of the game, but you start with one, and it doesn't matter what you sell because you dictate what you sell as you go. You also dictate the marketing. You dictate, how drinks are gotten to your restaurant, everything. The way you do this is by building a deck 1 card to 2 cards at a time, essentially. Every turn, everybody's got a CEO that can hire someone. The reason I bring this up in conjunction with Space Food Truck is not just that they both have food themes. I'm going to do some hellos real quick. We'll go back to this. Hello, John Amenta. He said, you're good on mic. Should come on a show called Pina something. I believe he means Pino Comics, which they also have an awesome radio show on WESU in Connecticut. So you should definitely be listening to John and John on Pint O Comics, and I really, really enjoy their show. I really, really do. Actually, that's I've been meaning to get to Connecticut for a long time to do their show. Dan says hello. Dan from Tectonic Studios. Good to see you again. I actually have my painting tray still sitting right here. I was just using it this week. I've got some projects that needed some paint. So, okay. So with Food Chain Magnate, here's the thing. In the first 4 turns, if you make a mistake, the rest of your game may be pretty awful. In Food Chain Magnate, if one of your opponents decides to do something in your first few turns that really screws you over, you might have an awful game. Not fully awful, just hard to recover. Just so hard to recover that it almost feels not worth playing the rest of the game sometimes. And I love Food Chain Magnate. I'm not complaining about the game. I am saying that there is a way that you can ruin someone's game and make it so difficult that, in fact, they may not enjoy the duration of the experience. Hey, Daryl, good to see you. Thank you for joining. That's Daryl Andrews. Congratulations on, I believe, many nominations for Sagrada, for Golden Geek and such. Congratulations, man. That's really, really great to hear. I own it. It's sitting right back up there. It's great. I've recently gotten a bunch of promos for it at different shows, and I can't wait to play it with those. Hello, Steven. Good to see you. Steven also does an awesome Super Retro Throwback Reviews site that if you like to go find out about the old stuff, also a bunch of horror stuff and all that kind of things. That's, anything pop culture. Steven's got a really cool outlet there. So Food Chain Magnate is probably one of the most brutalizing in terms of making a mistake potentially. So here's what happens is, let's say that in the first couple of turns someone decides to produce food and you have not produced food. Well, there's bonuses based on the first person to do certain things throughout the game. So if that person produced food and threw it away, they're going to get a refrigerator. However, if anyone who did not produce food and throw it away that first turn, the very first time this happens, does not get a refrigerator for the entire game. Why would a refrigerator be important? Well, you can store up to 10 food items. Otherwise, you have to throw all of your food away at the end of every single turn. This is a major advantage in my opinion. It's not one that necessarily wins you the game, but I usually suggest to new players, get the refrigerator. It's going to make life easier. Now, there's also something called eternal marketing. So while this person is getting the refrigerator, another person might start the first marketing campaign. And if they do that, then they're going to be able to keep their marketing campaigns on the board for the duration of the game, never having to rehire marketing agents or anything like that. It's brutal. It's brutal. If you get that and you can lock people out of, getting certain things, you can pretty much ruin somebody's entire restaurant. Let's say a restaurant's producing 2 pizza and a beer every turn. So it's got, 2 pizza and 1 beer that it makes, and that's what, or, the person can make, let's say, 10 pizza and pick up a few beers. All of a sudden, you market hamburgers right to the middle of their neighborhood. All of a sudden, their customers want hamburgers. And they don't produce any hamburgers. Their deck, they haven't built it to produce hamburgers. They haven't done anything to help produce hamburgers in their deck, which means they have only one way maybe to get a burger or 2. But you, across town, you've got a full supply of burgers, pizzas, and beer. So you're able to supply the other neighborhood because they lack the burgers needed. And so the game becomes extremely brutal. So it's a very fun game, but it is very, very mean. It's what I assume living and working in the restaurant business at the management level is like. To a certain extent, you're trying to gain the customers in each neighborhood, and it's very hard to reach people that are further away to bring them to come over. You've got to really do something. I mean, thematically, it's great. Now, another thing I wanted to mention about both Space Food Truck and Food Chain Magnate is this. Both games come in this just cute shell. They come in this really, really nice, tidy shell. Hey, Lindsay Davis, good to see you. Lindsay says Space Food Truck is a good multiplayer game, one of our gateway games for those we cannot convince to play League or Warframe, etc. That's an interesting point. It's not a hugely it's not a skill-based or dexterity-based video game, so you're not going to, if it's something where, like League of Legends, even I won't play that. That's just too much clicky and I like some dexterity-based games, but League of Legends and MOBAs are just generally not my particular type. Clinton Morris, good to see you. Hello, sir. So essentially, I think both these games do something neat, which is put a brutal, brutal engine into a cute shell. With Space Food Truck, you're running this food truck that you're going across space, meeting all these different aliens. Everything's got this cute, cartoony look, but in reality, it's one of the most brutal games you'll play. It's just very difficult. It's very punishing to mistakes. You don't get to, you don't get to go, oh, I made a mistake, but it's okay, I'll recover. No, you may not recover. You may lose the game, and most likely you'll lose the game. Same thing with Food Chain Magnate. It's got this cute, 50s style diner look to it with amazing artwork that, other than the board, is great. So it's really, really, hi Mom, nice to see you, everyone. That's my mom. So it's really interesting to see that everything but the board. The board itself is this modular thing you put up, and it's got all these white squares and spaces. It's relatively ugly in my opinion. It could have been done much better, but it fits the game to a certain extent. The rest of the art is amazing. The rest of the art is incredible. It's got this just really, really nice 50s diner style, and it really sells the theme. You open these menus that have all the different things you can do on it, which is so much nice. But I do agree. So Daryl Andrews says too much white space for Food Magnate, and I agree. That's the one complaint I have is it's a little too much blank white space, especially on the board. The board itself could benefit from just grass or anything to make it look more like a neighborhood. I think I've seen one on Board Game Geek where somebody has done some tiles or some pieces you can glue over those, and they've got grass, and then the streets are paved with asphalt, but then they have the yellow lines and stuff. I mean, it's just a little bit better looking map. So I think that game was like, 85% perfect, and the 15% that it needs is artwork, or 12% of what it needs is artwork, and 3% was just a little bit of like a balance that doesn't allow for a miserable experience for someone who maybe falls behind early. I would say that the catch-up mechanic in Food Chain Magnate is not really existent. Somebody might be able to counter that, but I just don't see a situation where if you're really behind, that you're able to go, oh, well, this is my slingshot. You know, this is the point where I'm going to be able to come forward and get back in the game. It's, you know, if two people are dominating the game and there's a third person who is maybe not having a great game, the third person is generally not going to get back into a competitive place. And that's my one sort of complaint. I do think that it makes for a competitive game, more like a video game where you've got to be good at it to do well. And I think there's something to be said for that type of game as well. So. All right, so I want to go into media, and it's interesting. One of the former hosts of this show is here, and the media I'm interested in talking about this week is Maple Syrup with Sin and Jesse. This is an interesting show. This is designers talking about game design, and Daryl Andrews, who's here, was formerly one of the hosts of this show as well. I believe Daryl only recently stepped away, probably due to the immense amount of games he's publishing, and probably a lot of responsibilities with that, I assume. Zach, good to see you. Zach says loop. Clinton says very punishing to new players to the point that many will not come back for a second game. Yeah, I think that's one of my main issues, Clinton, with Food Chain is that if you have that first game and you have a terrible first game, you may never play Food Chain again. I was taught by people who fortunately sort of gave me that heads up and that warning that, hey, this game can be pretty brutal. And then also the first time I learned it with the first three other people, we were all learning together, and we all learned wrong. And I think my first 2 to 3 plays had some wrong rules in them, and the next 6 times were always correct. So Daryl says I'll always have a special place in my heart, or part of my heart, for Maple Syrup Show. So I really like Sin. I don't know Jesse personally. I don't know Sen super personally. We only interact online. I plan to meet Sen at some point, and I really, really like Maple Syrup. Every time I listen to Sen, sort of speaking about the different decisions he made on games that he's helped work on or published, I generally learn something. Prior to that, when Daryl would talk, same thing. They would bring on some really great hosts, great guests. I think one time there was a panel with like Gil Hova and 3 other designers that I was really impressed with, and just couldn't believe they had all these people together at once. It was kind of fun. It's really, really a great show. So if you don't listen to Maple Syrup or watch Maple Syrup, you should definitely check it out. It's on Facebook as well, and they have their website up. And Sin is very knowledgeable about the industry. They're part of this Canadian group of game designers up there. I believe Daryl's in that group as well. I did not realize when I moved up north that so many of this game design community that's also in the Northeast or New England community is sort of tied to this sort of Canadian conglomerate that's up north, and that's very, very cool. I didn't realize that game design was so healthy in Canada either, and I keep meeting new people from Canada that have an incredible games that they've published or designed and things like that, and I guess that's where the Maple Syrup name comes from, is the Canadian portion possibly. So, oh, Sen himself. Hello, Sen. Good to see you. Sen says, thanks, Marshall. The website is not really up to date, to be honest. I noticed that when I checked, and I noticed that the hosts were not the current hosts on it, but I do know that you and Jesse tend to run the show, and if I've left anyone else out, feel free to tag them here as well. So thank you for dropping by as well. So yeah, it's a great show. Sin, are very, very, very knowledgeable. I also enjoy the way that the show is run, and it's very engaging. I've taken a lot from that here in terms of talking with people. Also, the mail call that Sin does each week, I've kind of taken a little bit from that, where I'll show you guys what's come in the mail for me at the beginning of each Monday. So I really enjoy the show, and I've definitely taken some inspiration from it. I also learn a lot when I'm watching. So there was one where I believe Sin was talking about the way they did the pretty incredible stretch goal setup, the non-stretch goal setup, I should say, for Korra. And hey, no problem, Sin. Thanks for Maple Syrup. I really enjoy it. So for Korra, they didn't do stretch goals. They just sort of did this narrative that unlocked, and I was really intrigued by that. It's been used quite a bit more now in different campaigns, so you're definitely a pioneer there. But I thought that was an interesting way to go about doing things, and I really, really respect the sort of bravery it takes to step outside of normal stretch goals because they're to a certain extent, they feel like a bit of a security blanket, right? Like, they're a way to sort of increase funds over a short amount of time. And the narrative, you still did very well with Korra. And I've seen some other people recently opening their boxes for that, and that's been fantastic to see on my social media feeds. It looks beautiful. Tom says Thomas says Tom Wetzel, hello, good to see you. This is an incredible member of the Cosmos and Thames team, Mr. Tom Wetzel. It says every game is easier with William the Refrigerator Perry. Sorry for the late joke. No problem. I agree. That refrigerator is absolutely needed, and the fridge is absolutely needed. So let's see here. I think, I can't speak enough to how good maple syrup is. You should just go watch it. Sin and Jesse really have a really good relationship where they bounce ideas back and forth. And Jesse seems to be sort of like a really good sort of overseer host type, and Sin is such a good personality. I really enjoy it. You guys should definitely check it out. That was all the gushing I'll do on seeing that the host came to visit here too. That's very cool. Thank you for dropping in, Sin. So marketing. This is going to be a little weird this week. I know that usually I talk about some sort of Kickstarter or some sort of other game thing, but I'm going to talk about Inspire Brands, who are the parent company of Arbys, and about Arbys Geek Marketing. I've been seeing something very interesting happen over the last year and a half on social media feeds and the like. I ignored it initially. I thought it might have been a strange, cheap way to sort of capture the counterculture. I don't know why I didn't like it initially. To be honest, I have a weird reactions to marketing sometimes. So what I'll say is this, is that what Arbys is doing is very interesting. They're doing short, animated little videos or little shorts, even GIFs at time, or GIFs if you like to call them that. It's GIF, like the peanut butter. Anyway, the Arbys pieces are all these little counterculture or pop culture, really at this point, references with fries and an Arby's sandwich in the background. I mean, it's no different than what you'd see on a poster with a burger at a Carl's Jr. or something like that, right? But then they put a cardboard cutout of the Farscape ship in front of them, or they put meeples next to the fries, or they put I'm trying to remember what one of the other ones was. It's a very strange to me at first. But then we sort of see that, like, okay, well, Arby's is actually trying to tap into a separate market solely by putting these identifiable objects next to their product. That's it. That's all they're doing in marketing in this way. And so on my social media feed today, I saw, I believe, if I recall, one of the social media and sort of like showrunners for IDW post something about, look at what Arby's is doing, a thing with the Farscape, cutout. And I said, well, that just got the attention of a major board game publisher. It is totally said like GIF. I am also going to go ahead and click love on that, Sen. So that's what that again. Sen says it's called association marketing, and that's exactly correct. So they're associating themselves with these different items, and that's all it has to be. Is just, again, this little cardboard cutout of a Farscape, ship. That's it. And now you've got Farscape fandom going, oh man, I'm going to Arby's. There was another one where they cut, I believe, either chicken strips or their mozzarella sticks, something, it doesn't matter at this point, into a little thing that was the forward left circle, and then they had a little punch at the end. Which, if you've played a bunch of Street Fighter or any fighting game that's on a video game, you'll know that forward circle punch is a pretty strong move for the most part, and it's the core of many fighting games is forward half circles. Actually, is what it was. So forward half circle. So down, forward, and then they had a little punch symbol. I believe one of the posts I just looked at prior to this while researching this marketing avenue, it was a friend of mine. I'm not going to call them out, but it says, "I'm going to Arby's tomorrow, IDGAF." So they don't care at all, and they're going to Arby's tomorrow based on the fact, and it was sharing this post. So a half circle and a punch gained a customer. It's I'm starting to realize that maybe in the board game world we could put some of this to work and associate ourselves with other things. I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult than your standard, here's a burger and fries, you could also do this. However, think about something like New York Slice, which that makes you think about pizza already. You say New York Slice, well, let's team up with, this is horrible because I don't think that it's even really pizza, but let's say, I'd prefer it to be a local pizza place with good pizza. Let's say that to first start off with. That's not how you do this on a national level, however. Let's say New York Slice was something that said, get New York Slice at your local Barnes & Noble or Target, and then drop by Papa John's. Or, no, that's terrible. Don't give them your business. Any of those terrible pizza chain places. This is all marketing. This is not for what's really good. And you get a coupon inside of the box that is good for a year from the date that we put them out or something like that, and you can get a discounted pizza to go have pizza tonight while you play this game where you decide who takes what piece of pizza. Now that's a very basic, simple way to think about doing it with board games. But even with something, yes, no Papa John's. Papa John's is evil. I agree. Yeah. That's the implied endorsement. Yes, no Papa John's. Yeah, let's stop even bringing up their name. They're a horribly run company, in my personal opinion. As someone who drove for them in a very early college, it's a brutal place. And yeah, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So the way that I think we could also do the sort of associative marketing with popular other products is based on thematic stuff. And so we've got Stir Fry 18 at Yanaguana Games. The way I actually do most of the marketing for Stir Fry 18 at conventions is when I get to each city, I go find a local Chinese restaurant. I buy one case of their fortune cookies, and I usually buy 100 to 200 of their one pint containers, and we put stir fry into that with the fortune cookie and usually a couple goodies to sell at conventions. This marketing works very well. Now, unfortunately, usually the little box is just a generic one. They all purchase them, and they've got a little pagoda on them. It looks very nice. It helps us, but it doesn't really help the restaurant at this point. At some times when we're very, very close, like in Philadelphia, we were planning to get some menus, but I think the restaurant was already so busy because of the influx of people at PAX Unplugged that they said, this is not, we don't really want to do this right now because we're so busy right now. We only have so much staff, and it was a fairly small place. But to put the menus out where we're, showing and go, hey, this place is only 2 blocks down the street, you could go and have some Chinese food. And so Chinese restaurants are great. They're always, I've never had a single one tell me no. They go, sure, how many do you want? And right away they'll sell me some. And that's fantastic. It also makes it to where I don't have to ship these things around most of the time. So I think that's a good way that you can sort of cross-promote, is find a local restaurant or something like that, even to stick a few games in while people are having dinner. If you've got a small, accessible, light game like that, and say, hey, this is a little game, family game you can play and learn if you're just sitting at the table. I've thought about at times putting a few on, the front 5 or 6 tables of our Chinese food restaurant I go to at a regular basis. They have a copy there. I don't think they bring it out. I think they play it in the kitchen sometimes. But I've also thought about, with Record, we've got music stores that we're already looking to get into. Bundling Record with like a guitar or an amplifier or a little miniature package is something that's really in my head after thinking about Arbys. So let's say that I hook up with Fender and say, hey, what if we did like a Fender Squier, a starter amp and a starter. So this is the idea of like you're starting out just learning to play guitar, but also this board game comes with it, right? So you get an amplifier, you get an awesome looking little board game, you get a guitar, you get a set of picks, you get maybe a fake book to learn some stuff. And it's this package for under $200 where somebody takes home all this stuff, including Record. It's just, again, I think there's ways that we as board game publishers and developers can tie our products into the mainstream, which will then grow our hobby, which is really what video games have done for a large majority. A lot of times when a huge game breaks out, there's some sort of callback to a major event, or something that interests people, and that's how you drive more interest. And I think we can definitely drive more interest as tabletop publishers. There's the percentage of the population that plays board games as a regular hobby is so small. Like, we have, the sky's the limit for tabletop developers right now, and especially as people get burnt out on certain types of video games being rehashed. Although there's great video games, I can't complain about like how many good games there are. But as people get burnt out, what we'll find is that more and more people turn to tabletop. That's been my experience. I don't know if there's a lot of metrics to support that, but my experience is when people start to tire of video games, they move to the tabletop, because they still want those mechanics and they want those thought processes, but they want to tangibly be able to touch them, to move things around, and to learn the system to a way that, in a way that they can teach others. So I think board games are very special in that way. Thank you. Sin says, the package idea is nifty. I appreciate that. I'm very, very fortunate that we ran into a publisher at Toy Fair that does the toys and the gifts for Sam Ash and Guitar Center. I'm working with them at this point, and I can't really speak to until everything's locked down. I can't really speak to what the plan is, but it's very, very possible that actual thing might be a thing. And I would be thrilled to see that, as well as just see Record in an outlet that was not a toy or game store, that was a music store per se. I just think it's great if we can capture more of the world and get them to understand what we're doing is a whole lot of fun, and it doesn't take a lot of overhead or space unless you've got a ridiculous collection. I just think it's something that we can definitely capture more of the population and bring them into our hobby and show them our community. And it's really, in my opinion, one of the best. I mean, I have more great friends from board games than probably anything else. So, well, guys, I really, unless you've got any questions, feel free to shoot them out there. I'm going to start wrapping up. I appreciate you dropping in and checking in this week. Again, this was Lavazza's Perfetto Espresso Roast. Very, very tasty coffee. I absolutely recommend it. And then the mechanics I was interested in this week are Space Food Truck and Food Chain Magnate, both having brutal deck building, sort of no mistakes possible type of mechanics, along with a very cutesy theme. So I thought that was a very interesting correlation those two games shared. Also that they're both food themed. That was also interesting. So for media, Meeple Syrup, thank you, Sin, for checking in. Daryl, thank you. Daryl says another great episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for dropping in. This is so much fun to get to chat with you all, and I really appreciate the interaction. It makes it so much easier on me. And then again on marketing this week, it was the Arbys associative marketing, how they're just kind of getting a new group of fans potentially by saying, hey, we're kind of similar to you. We like sci-fi stuff, or we like board game stuff. So very, very neat. Thank you guys again. Thank you, Clinton. Thank you, Brad. Y'all have a fantastic week. Thank you for sharing this cup of coffee with me, and we'll see you again next week on Monday. Bye-bye.